I know many of you are excited for the 2:30 matchup between Arkansas and Ole Miss. Want to go to the phone lines and welcome in Tony Barnhart of the SEC Network, longtime SEC football writer and commentator. Tony, appreciate you giving some time for us this morning, man.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
So let's start with the biggest game of the weekend, Tony. Georgia, Alabama in Tuscaloosa. I know the news was just as surprising to you as many of us with the breaking news that Nick Saban will not be able to coach in this football game. Tony, how much is that going to impact Arkansas and Georgia tomorrow?
Oh, I think it's a situation where you got a guy who's arguably the greatest coach of all time. How much is that worth? It's worth at least a touchdown. And if you're playing at home, I definitely think it's worth a touchdown. I think Georgia already had a chance to win this game. Now, if they do some things and put them in place, and keep in mind now, I'll share this with you. There's still an outside chance that Nick Saban could coach in this game. The SEC protocols say if he takes three more tests and they all come back negative, then he could be eligible to play. Is it a long shot? Yeah, but keep your eye on that. But to answer your question, no. Not having Nick Saban there for a game of this magnitude is huge.
And I made the mistake saying Arkansas, Georgia. It's obviously Alabama and Georgia. But Tony, and Tony, correct me if I'm wrong. I've seen several reports on this. There's no way for him to coach outside of the stadium. Within like 90 minutes of the game, they cut off communication from outside the stadium inside, right?
That's right. There's no, and the rules are very clear. I got a copy of the bulletin. Ironically, it was written earlier this year by Steve Shaw, who used to be the SEC supervisor of officials, now the national supervisor of officials. He and I traded text messages yesterday. He cannot sit in his living room and call the press box and say, do this. According to the rule now and the memo, the only communication that can take place on the sideline must come from the press box. It cannot come from anywhere else. So, no, Coach Saban cannot. He can't call up his assistants in the press box and say, do this.
It will be tempting, though. I'm sure it will be tempting at times if he's forced to watch from home. So, but
I'm sure. All I know is that if Nick Saban has to watch the game from home, I'll bet his wife, Miss Terry, is not going to be anywhere near him.
I bet she goes shopping or something. Hey, compare these two defenses, because I think that's the real matchup, even though they're not on the field at the same time. So maybe give us your insight or your thoughts of the Georgia defense going up against this Alabama offense and vice versa, because the strength of both of these teams is the defenses, of course. Which of these two defenses is better? Because I think after watching the first few games, I lean towards Georgia's defense has got the leg up on Alabama at this point.
Well, I think after what we saw between Ole Miss and Alabama, you'd have to go with Georgia's defense and the way they played. Two games, Auburn and Tennessee, that Georgia played, they literally shut those teams down, particularly in the second half. They're fast, they're athletic. If Georgia's not the number one defense in America, then it's Clemson and Georgia's number two. Let's put it that way. Alabama's defense is good, but they were just overwhelmed by what they saw against Ole Miss last week. They're not going to see that very often. But Georgia's got the edge on defense, but Alabama's pretty good.
When you look at the quarterback matchups in this game, that's another big comparison in this game. Which team do you Mac Jones, still trying to settle into this, and Stetson, when you look at these two matchups, which team do you feel has the edge in running their offense, and which team will maybe succumb to the pressure of those defenses with their quarterback spot?
Well, these two guys are asked to do completely different things. Mac Jones, first of all, Mac Jones is one of the more underrated players in the country. I think the guy's really good. He throws the best deep ball in the SEC. And he's got great weapons around him. So his job is to distribute the ball all over the place and several times a game take the deep shot with Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith and Mitchie, and those guys are hard to cover. Now, Stetson Bennett, the fourth, is a completely different quarterback. His job is to manage the game, get into the right play, get out of the bad play, complete key third downs, use his athletic ability, which is better than a lot of people think, to move the chains and let Georgia do the ball that way. He'll make a couple of shots during the field, but that's not his thing. So I think both of these guys do exactly what their team needs, and what their team needs from quarterback are different.
Tony Barnhart with us here on the Morning Rush. Tony, after watching Florida early on, I was thinking they're really going to give Georgia all they can handle. They stumble to Texas A&M this last week. Even if Georgia loses to Alabama tomorrow night, what odds would you give them being able to beat Florida and get back to the SEC championship game in December?
Guys, look, I have been going to Georgia, Florida for 35 years, and I'm telling you, nothing that happens before the game has anything to do with how that game's going to be played. If they played today, I would give Georgia the edge because of defense. But when we get to November 7th, there is no telling what the world is going to look like. But right now, because of defense, I think Georgia would have an edge over Florida. But I'm a big believer in Kyle Trask, the Florida quarterback. He did what he had to do last week. The defense just couldn't hold up. So right now, yeah, I like Georgia. But ask me again on November 7th. I may change my mind.
Tony, you bring up Kyle Trask. He's one of the premier quarterbacks in the SEC, if not the best. But I want to talk to another guy, and that's Matt Corral, as Arkansas has to face off him tomorrow. He hung 48 on Alabama last week. Tony, how much is that a byproduct of Lane Kiffin's system compared to Matt's actual talent that he possesses on the football field?
I can tell you this: Lane Kiffin, when he got to Ole Miss, had no idea how good Matt Corral was. He'd heard about him. He knew he had a pretty lively arm. But once Matt Corral got in Lane Kiffin's system, he's taken advantage of all the skills that he had. Listen, remember, this kid was recruited out of California by Hugh Freeze to be the next big thing at Ole Miss. All right, but then John Rice Plumlee came along, and Rich Rodriguez was the offensive coordinator, and Rich Rod likes to run the ball with his quarterback. So John Rice Plumlee, all he did was lead all quarterbacks in the SEC in rushing with incredible speed. But Lane's offense is different, and Matt Corral just absolutely took to it. So this guy, and they've got receivers, they got a bunch of weapons, and I would say that Matt Corral we knew was talented, but he has thrived under Lane Kiffin's system.
Tony, what are your thoughts on Sam Pittman through 3 ball games? A lot of people unsure about the old offensive line coach who'd been around the SEC for about a dozen seasons or so, and college football at this level for about 25 years, who took over the Arkansas job. People around the league weren't really sure about this hire. What's your evaluation of Sam Pittman after 3 ball games?
I told people when Arkansas hired Sam Pittman, I said, look, here's a guy who knows the game, who players love him. He's a great recruiter. He understands the elements that go into winning. And of course, I know Coach Pittman from his time at Georgia. I got to know him really, really well and think a lot of him. Sam Pittman told me everything he needed to know, I needed to know, when he went out and got Barry Odom to be his defensive coordinator. I said, okay, he is serious about that side of the ball. And the other side of the ball, once they got Felipe Franks, I said that side of the ball will take care of itself. The fact that they gave Georgia fits for a half, then it kind of fell down after that. The way that they have played, obviously we're in position to win the other night at Auburn. I think Sam Pittman's done a marvelous. Look, Arkansas was looking for their Ed Orgeron, for a guy who wanted an opportunity. I think Sam Pittman is that person.
How do you expect this Arkansas-Ole Miss game to play out? I think, after watching Ole Miss and Alabama get into a shootout a week ago, really seeing how Ole Miss's defense is not set up to stop very many teams. A lot of people feel like this is going to be a shootout tomorrow afternoon in Fayetteville. Do you think this is a game played in the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, or is it more than that? How do you see this game between the Rebels and the Razorbacks?
Yes. To me, it's pretty simple. If for Arkansas to win, the game needs to be in the 30s. It can be in the high 30s, but the game needs to be in the 30s. I think once it creeps into the 40s, if it does, it's going to be difficult to beat Ole Miss at that game. That's number one. Number two, and this is something I know Coach Odom will be looking at. Lane loves to run all kinds of plays, underneath stuff, here, throw it over here, throw it over there. All he's doing is setting you up for the deep shot downfield. You cannot get beat deep too many times in this game. If you can avoid the big plays, make them throw stuff underneath, they'll get a bunch of yards, but not a bunch of points. So Arkansas, to me, has to keep the game in the 30s.
Tony Barnhart with us here on the Morning Rush. Tony, you think about the weapons that Matt Corral and Lane Kiffin have, Elijah Moore, Snoop Connor, Yeboah, Ely. I mean, there's guys all over the place. Who does Arkansas need to key in on the most defensively to have the best chance to stop Ole Miss?
Well, I think they all have done incredibly well, but you just again they've got the leading tight end perceptions, just incredible talent. But of all the weapons, just tell your safeties, no matter what, you cannot let guys blow by you because these guys have got speed. The Moore kid is unbelievable, and you just can't let him beat you.
Tony, it's crazy to think about. You think about Dante Moncrief, you think about A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf. I mean, the list goes on and on for Ole Miss wide receivers, and Moore now seems to be on that list as well. Before we let you go, Tony, if Arkansas beats Ole Miss on Saturday to put up a showing they did against Auburn, to beat Mississippi State, if this trend continues for Sam Pittman in the right direction the rest of the way, how much should we consider him to be the SEC Coach of the Year?
Wow. You're talking about a guy who inherited a program that had lost 19 straight conference games, and 2 games in, he gets a win and plays Georgia tough. And I think considering what he's had to deal with and the overall state of the program when he got here, if they keep on and post some other big wins, you absolutely have to consider him the Coach of the Year.
Tony Barnhart of the SEC Network, longtime writer and broadcaster for the SEC. Tony, we really appreciate your time this morning. Enjoy the Georgia-Alabama game. I know all eyes will be on that after the conclusion of the Arkansas-Ole Miss game here, man.
Okay, guys. Good to be with you.